Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Friends, it's time once again for the Gone to the Dogs podcast. Your host, Steve Fielder, with you one more time. And once again, I'm going to reach down to the great state of Texas. It seems like I've been on a Texas roll here the last few episodes with Ray Dismukes and with Mark Gilmore. And now I'm very, very happy to be able to speak with my longtime friend down, southwest Texas way, not far from San Antonio, in Luling, Texas. Actually, do you live in Flatonia or Luling, Kenwood?
No, I was born and raised in Flatonia. But we moved to Luling when both my dad and my wife's mother were getting old, and they were in rest homes, so we moved down here in 91.
Okay, well, that's the voice of Kenwood Maeker. Those of you out there that have been around a while know Kenwood as a black and tan man. May have met him at black and tan days, almost. It's hard to tell. He was pretty active in the AKC world when I was there and all. And so, Kenwood, it's just great to have you on our broadcast today, or our podcast, as I should say. But, yeah, well, I did a little sneaking around here, looking and all, and I think you're an interesting guy. I always did. I know you've had a lot of good black and tan dogs, and I've always admired them. And all, and had the privilege to hunt with them a time or two, maybe, and also, yeah. But I always thought about you as being the oil man. So I want to, before we get into that, that's a little teaser for our listeners. Let's talk about what it was like to grow up in Luling, Texas. Is that where you were born?
Grew up in Flatonia, Texas.
Oh,
Flatonia. We lived on a farm, and I come along in 38, and we just still struggling through the Depression back then. And I got my first hound, I think, when I was about 7 years old, and hunted with my dad. And that, from that on, that first dog was a black and tan.
See. You stuck with them pretty much.
Yeah. I think when I was growing up in Flatonia, there's about 1,090 people there. If you did something wrong in Flatonia, your mama knew about it before you got home. So,
yeah,
but it was a wonderful community to grow up in.
Oh, I can imagine, Kenwood, and you are one of the few people that I talked to that actually has a year or two on me in age. But hey, age is just a number, isn't it?
That's right. I might be 87 years young, and I say young because I think that if you don't feel old, you're not really old.
Yeah,
now, I don't hunt as much as I used to. I got to ride a cart around, but I do enjoy going out and listening to the hounds.
Yeah, I saw a picture on Facebook that your son had posted. I believe, was that Joe, where you were working cattle with him?
Yep, that's my son, Joe.
Yeah. Now, about your family, I know your wife, its name is Suzanne, and I was able to meet her, I believe, for the first time at our Purino Award banquet there in College Station. And we want to talk about that a little bit. But how many children do you and Suzanne have, Ken?
I have two. Joe is a superintendent for Strike. He lays pipeline and sets compressors, and my daughter is a English teacher, head of the English department at Port Gregory, Portland. They have 3 children, and so I've got 3 grandchildren there, and I got 3 great grandchildren with that side, and then Joe has a son, and then 2 stepsons, and all of those I consider my
of course.
grandsons, and
Yeah.
and they have 6 great grandsons of mine. So I'm really got blessed with a great family. I really am.
Absolutely, and I saw some of the pictures on social media there, your family, and just really, really cool. Well, you grew up on a farm. Your dad was a coon hunter too.
Yep.
So what were you?
He was a possum hunter.
A possum. Okay.
Possum hunter. Back then, the only place when in the early 40s that had any coon were on the big bottoms, Peach Creek bottom, Buckner's bottom, the Nueces River. I mean, bottom. We just didn't have a lot of coon. And then they started creep feeding, and the coon numbers exploded because they could get in the cattle creep feed and didn't have to go far to raise a family, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so the coons, I mean, they just exploded. And and that's when I started coon hunting. I took my old first dog. I was about 11 years old. Name was Skipper, black and tan, and I started training him, moved from possum to coon with him.
Well, my dad there in Tennessee, he and his brother were possum hunters with their cur dogs.
Yeah.
And Dad would say every once in a while the dogs would tree, maybe take a track a good little ways and tree, and it'd be up a big, tall tree, probably an oak or something. And he said we just figured it was a coon, but we couldn't find him because we just had like a 2-cell flashlight or a kerosene lantern. And didn't really, if he didn't want to look, we weren't going to be able to find him,
I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, my dad was born in 1920 and, of course, lived through that Depression era and then went in the Army in 1939. Now, you were in the Army too, right?
Yeah, yes, I was. I served 61, 62, and 63.
Okay.
And I never did get to go overseas, but I trained a lot of boys that did. I was a trained sniper, and I trained a lot of people that went over there. They were.
Yeah.
It was really like I tell anybody, I wouldn't take $1 million for experience that I had in the service, but I would again for $1 million.
Yeah, I understand fully.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you were serving the country while I was in high school. I graduated in 1964.
Okay.
And my wife Ella in 1965, and that's something I've been bragging on social media and have on this podcast as well. About a month ago, Ella and I went up to Fort Benning, Georgia, and watched our granddaughter graduate from Army Advanced Infantry training. Now, this little gal, I'm telling you, she's tough as nails. She's a pretty little thing, as we used to say, pretty as a speckled pup. I said, Alyssa, why did you choose the infantry? She says, that $20,000 signing bonus.
Yeah, okay.
I said, well, I don't know. But, she went through that training and surprised us when they had the ceremony there, and it was a very moving ceremony. And they called out a handful of the graduates to give special recognition. I'll be darned if she wasn't one of them. And the only lady among that group, and they promoted her right on the spot to private first class. And I
All
thought,
right.
man, this little gal gets it. But I think she's got her grandma's spunk. That's what it is. It's Ella's granddaughter. And but anyway, my dad was in the Army, went in 39 and was in for the duration of the war and all that. So we have a proud Army tradition, although I did Air Force myself. But
Well, my grandson was my Bobby Maeker. Graduated in Fort Benning as a ranger.
Oh yeah,
And he served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, and
God bless him.
come back out, and he is a DPS officer in the helicopter group. I just witnessed him yesterday doing tether training for rescue.
Yeah,
And it was really a realistic thing. Fishing people out of the water, out of trees, out of obstacle. I was really proud of him.
I bet you were. Yeah,
I busted
man.
a few snaps off my shirt.
I tell you that. Well, as part of that graduation ceremony, they showed us an 8-person squad of infantry, and they started across the field from the grandstand where we were sitting, and they came toward us. And of course, they had the artillery exploding and all this stuff and the smoke. And here they came in, and they explained what each squad member's job was and what kind of weapon they had and all.
Yep.
Man, it was so moving. I mean, it really kind of brought the whole thing together. You see exactly what these young people are training for. And man, I don't know. I'm a real patriotic guy, I guess. And that just kind of stuff just gets down below my 5th rib,
I know exactly where you're coming from. When Bobby graduated from Ranger School, we went up there, and I will say that he was the top graduate at Ranger School, and he was the top graduate in the Texas DPS school. He's one of those individuals that's intelligent and extremely competitive. Don't give him a reason to try something, because he's going to do it.
Yeah. Well, it takes that kind for sure, And,
Yep.
Well, okay. So we're back in Flatonia, Texas, on the farm. Dad's a coon hunter. He's got black and tans. What's your earliest memory of going coon hunting?
Hunting. I wanted to go coon hunting, and I talked to Uncle Leon Maeker, my father's brother. He always was kind of a mentor, and I wanted to go hunting. And he knew some people over in Welder called the Drake Boys. I don't know why they called them boys. They were 50 years old, but they had coon dogs.
Yeah.
And he said, "I'll get you to go with him." He said, "Bring your dog, we'll go." Sure enough, got a chance to go. We went down, and they told me, said, "Now don't you turn that dog loose. We don't want our Australian possum. You let our dog strike, and then you turn your dog." I said, "Yes, sir, yes, sir." And they turned the dogs loose. They got down, and they struck pretty quick. He said, "All right, you can turn Skipper loose." And I turned Skipper loose, and he went in there, trailed about 2 or 3 minutes. I didn't recognize him. On a possum, he always barked with a chop. Heck, he had a pretty little thinner ball. They said, "There's your dog." I said, "Ain't my dog." And he said, "Yeah, that's your dog." When he sat down and treed, I recognized him. I said, "Well, he's treed. That sucker treed a possum that got in there and had a coon."
And you got the last laugh on that one, huh?
Oh, yeah. Turned loose to their dogs again. He treed again, had another coon. I couldn't hunt, but on Friday night.
Yeah.
Because Saturday night, we had to get up and go to church on Sunday morning.
Right.
But so every Friday night, the Drake would call and say, "Miss Ida, would you let that boy go hunting with us?" And bring that dog.
Bring his dog. Don't forget old Skipper.
Yeah, that's for sure. That was
Oh,
fun.
that's great.
That was my first coon hunting experience.
Yeah, well, that having a dog like that would probably pretty well chart your future right there, coon hunting, make a coon hunter out of you for sure.
I don't know if you or people in your area had trouble finding tree dogs. And when you found a tree dog when I was growing up, that was a treasure. A dog that could
Yeah.
strike trail and tree a coon. You had a lot of dogs that run tracks, but they didn't know to look up. But Skipper was just a natural tree dog.
Yeah. Now, was he black and tan as well?
Black and tan. He was the first black and tan I ever owned. I got him when he was 5 years old from Mr. Tipton. Brought him home in a cold winter day in one of the toboggan hats. I got him home. I brought him, and Mama said, "What are you doing with that dog?" But after a few tears, I won the argument.
Well, mamas kind of tend to give in. There's a lot of great stories about mamas providing the way for their boys, to get a dog and all. Maybe when dad wasn't so keen on the idea, But mamas have their way,
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. And, well, we all, started somewhere, and I started with my dad, and my listeners have heard my story many, many times. But that heritage factor, I think, is one of the reasons why we don't have as many young people coming into the sport these days as we did, maybe when you and I were growing up. It's because they're growing up in town. They're not growing up in a rural setting. And they don't have anybody to mentor them or, like your uncle there, for instance.
Growing uptown with an iPhone in front of them. And then there's so much, my great-grandchildren, there's so much for them to do.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and the demands of school and everything else going on. I got an 11-year-old granddaughter, great-granddaughter, that she goes to school, she plays basketball, she runs track. She got second in shot put the other day.
Oh, my goodness.
And there's just so much. So don't leave much room. I know when my son was growing up, he hunted with me, and he handled my dogs and what have you. My grandson come along, and when y'all held a AKC hunt at Newcomerstown, Ohio, the black and tan days up there, my grandson handled a dog for me up there.
Yeah.
So, and he enjoyed it, but then, he goes to college and graduate from A&M, and then goes to into the Army and does 5 years with the Rangers, and then comes back and is a DPS officer. They just don't have much time anymore.
They don't. That's right. And, so many stories that I could tell about that. And like, there's a young fellow that was really into coon hunting here for the last couple of years, and he wanted a puppy, and I told him about Randy Smith up in Pennsylvania, and he bought a puppy from Randy, and I happened to be up there, and I brought it back to Virginia for him, and he trained that dog out by himself and made a whale of a coon dog. But he put in all the shoe leather on that dog and had never trained one from the ground up, so to speak, before. Yep. Ended up, though, a young man, very industrious, works all the time, has a young family, 4 children, and he just finally had to say, I got to give this up. I just don't have time for it all, Yeah,
that's happened so often.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I told him, he said, well, the kids are in ball and cheerleading and all that. And I said, well, those years will go by faster than you can imagine. And, those coon dogs will still be around, hopefully, when the kids are up and grown.
Yep.
Yeah, my son hunted with me, like yours, and seemed
Yep.
to enjoy it. But I think he just enjoyed the experience of being out with Dad. He always liked to shoot.
Oh, yeah.
When you're young, you like to shoot stuff, and all that. But he never did have that extra chromosome down there for the hounds, like my dad did, and I named this podcast and the book I wrote "Gone to the Dogs" because that's what my mother always said. She'd look out the kitchen window and see all those hounds out there, and she'd say, my dad's name was unusual, it was Holman. She said, Holman, we've gone to the dogs. And that's kind of what, but it had a double meaning too. It's, where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs. And the dogs are setting treat in there, so. But anyway, that's, my listeners have heard those old stories so many times. Well,
I always kidded my dad. He always, when he went hunting, he always took a link of sausage, and then we're going to stop somewhere during the night, and we're going to cook that sausage over the fire.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you come from an area that's predominantly, now correct me if I'm wrong, German descent. Is that right?
My community was German and Czech.
Okay.
We in Scott School area where I grew up, that was all the Clovenances, the Wiedemans, the Makers. And then 2 miles to the east of us was a little community called Praha, and that was all Czech people.
I see.
And then over to the north, as Granddaddy always said, that's the Americans. They were the English descendants.
Oh, okay.
So that was the three and mixes that we had in our community.
I get what drew the Czechs to Texas? Farming?
Believe it or not, the little town of Praha, when Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia, they had a tremendous enlistment from the people in that Praha, and the Praha had more casualties in World War II than any community its size in the United States.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
And they have on Veterans Day, my son-in-law, who was a retired captain in the Navy, he spoke there about 4 years ago at they always have a big Veterans Day. They have flyovers and what have you.
Yeah.
And it's really a moving experience to go there.
Sure, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. You grew up and I grew up knowing all about World War II, although, my dad, all my uncles were in the military and went through some were in the Army, some in the Navy, some in the Marine Corps. And, we talked about it. We played Army when we were kids, and all of that. But we really didn't realize what those guys went through,
No.
But until the veterans got older and they began to talk a little bit about their experiences and all, and then my dad began to go to reunions. In fact, I think he may have went to one in San Antonio once. He and Mother, and I always remember him saying that one of his officers, he was enlisted, he was a supply sergeant, I think, for his outfit. But anyway, he said the guy was talking to the group, and he said, if it wasn't for us boys, we'd all be speaking Japanese.
He's right.
Yeah, so they were the greatest generation in my view. I mean, it's just amazing. But
tell you a little story about my uncle. He was about 19 and got a draft notice. Of course, they were drafting everybody. And he said when he got drafted, he actually had 6 toes on each one of his feet.
Oh.
And
he would have fit in down at Key West with Ernest Hemingway's cats. They have the six-toed cats down there.
Well, he took off. Just said, "Look at here, I've got 6 toes. I don't know whether I can serve or not." He said, "Well, you'll go in the Navy," and that's where he served.
Yeah.
But,
What about that? That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
That was Uncle Oscar Lee Cook. He was an amazing uncle. He was the baby brother of my mother's family of 10 siblings.
oh wow.
Yep.
Well, Kenwood, the families were all bigger back then. Both my parents came from families of 9.
Okay.
And there's an interesting story. You met Jerry Mall, who worked with, Jerry. German family, he and his wife both, they're in Indiana. Each of them was the 13th child of their family. Jerry was in his family, and Brenda was in her family. And I thought that was amazing. I said, "Boy, I bet you have a big time at Christmas." He said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe it, Steve." But yeah, the bigger families, were the thing. And now they get smaller and smaller. My son has 1 daughter. Yeah. And I can't complain because I only had 1 son. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great stuff, Kenwood. Great stuff. All right.
Yeah.
Now okay. I want to know. Yeah, I rolled a teaser out there about the oil deal, and I always knew that you were involved in the oil business, and that you traveled all over the world. Tell my listeners about that.
I started in the oil field. I was working at Southwest Texas, and now it's called Texas State University. And in education, back then, it just couldn't really make any big money. So I got into the oil field. I got into it as a mud engineer, and then moved up and got into drilling. And once I got there, I made wellside superintendent. And as a result of that, I went to Nigeria and Indonesia and Kuwait and India. It was a great ride. It was good, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I wouldn't wish Nigeria on anybody. That was a cruel area. Indonesia was fun. India was fun. They were good people. Some of the most intelligent people that I dealt with were some engineers that I worked in with in India, and they were very. You teach them something, and they had it down. They were good.
They weren't just the guy that said, "How are you doing? Come into my convenience store."
No, they were good people.
I'm going to get hate mail for that. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, how about that?
My heart surgeon is Karendi. He's an Indian.
Yeah.
Mohandas is my doctor. I kind of they've come over here and they've done a marvelous job in medicine.
Oh yeah, so is my cardiologist. Is the Indian, doctor. His last name, he's either Indian or Pakistani, but I think he's Indian. Ali is his last name, but
I worked for Superior Oil and Mobil Oil and Exxon and ConocoPhillips. So the last 20 years, more than that, last 25 years, I consulted. I was hired out. I'd work about 220 days a year for different oil companies as a specialized consultant for wellside problems.
So, for wellside problems, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I guess I assumed maybe that you were the guy that told them where to drill, but was that not? Is that right?
No. No, I've got a grandson now that tells them where to drill. He's a geologist, but
right.
They drove the stake and I drilled the well then.
I got you. I got you. Well, what an interesting job and an opportunity for a boy from Flatonia, Texas, population 1,000, to travel the whole wide world, you know?
It really opened the world. You see things in a different light, and you realize when you're over there that there's no place on this earth that's more opportunities presented to the people than the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we need to always remember that.
Yeah, as they say it loud for the people in the back.
Yeah.
And I think of all, we won't get on politics because everybody knows what my politics are. But, people want to leave this country, Well, go ahead. You might get more than you bargained for, but give her a shot.
I've always said if everybody could do a 2-month stretch in Indonesia or Nigeria or India or Vietnam or places like that, when they'd come back, they'd kiss the ground and say, God, I'm so great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, all of that was almost as good as going to Black and Tan Days, wasn't it?
I enjoyed my Black and Tan Days.
Did you do a hitch as president?
I served as a director. As a treasurer. I served as a president, and I think who was the big old fella that always get up and talk and go on and on and on?
Well, who could forget John Dees? John Dees from the great state of Florida.
You remember when I had my meeting, when he got up, I said, I'll take that under advisement. Thank you. Sit down. We had one of the shortest meetings in the history of the Black and Tan Association.
You bring up a point there, and I want to go back to that because I think between you and Ed Abel, you pretty much got that association straightened out, going down the right road. But, I attended so many breed association meetings and all over the years, as when I first started at full-time at UKC with Fred Miller, and he would sit right there on the front row with his what's the thing I want to use? The board. What is the clipboard? His clipboard and taking notes and have his eyebrows all knitted down, taking in every word. And I thought, man, I just want to be friendly with these people. I don't want to intimidate them or antagonize them. But no, I learned a lot from Fred. But I sat through those meetings. And you had your guys that had to have the center stage, and it seemed like every association had one, and you had one of the best there with Mr. Dees. He used to write a column for Coonhound Bloodlines. It was called Round the Pickle Barrel.
That's right.
And he was from down around, I think, Crawfordsville or somewhere there in the western panhandle of Florida. But, I remember that. Some of those guys could just wear you down,
Well, I joined the Black and Tan Association in 1968. I think they had to hunt in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
Okay.
And I really... over the years, Black and Tan Days became a family reunion for me. I mean, It was like a family reunion. Everybody, it was the most cordial association. Everybody was pulling for everybody. It was we rallied around the breed. And you think about it, the number of people that I met: Junior Ralston, Bill Bloodworth, John McDonald, Carl Meinhardt, Tam Young, and so many more. Gene Hicks, Nubbin Moore. All these Black and Tan people, and Mr. Billy Hall from Bruce, Mississippi. They just great people. and they love their dog. Just think of some of the impacts sires. John McDonald with his Night Rider dog.
Oh yeah.
Tam Young
Yeah.
with Wheeler.
Yeah.
Uh, Bill Boatman with Bloodworth Black
Black
Bill
Bill.
and Junior Ralston with his line of dogs.
Yeah. Good personal friend.
Allen and Marshall White. They tried to keep
the old Wagner strain.
The old Wagner's line
Yeah.
going, and you think about it, there were so many dogs that put their print on the black and tans, and as they progressed, I was, and I'll say this, I was against going crossbred. A lot of times I thought when you crossbred your dogs, you admitted that you weren't up with the dog with the breed that you were trying to cross into. So I keep them pure, because let me tell you what, we're outnumbered, but look at the dogs in the last 15 years, and the black and tan has been pretty well represented in the world hunt.
Oh yeah.
And that, so I'm proud of what the black and tan breeders have done. I think they've been very successful. They're breeding a good hound. Jim Blackburn is up there at Black and Tan Days. He's getting up in age. Of course, he's a spring chicken compared to me. I'm 87, but let me tell you what, I do love my black dogs, and
I know you do.
I've had such a pleasure with them. I've had Diamondback Smoke. I had Trail Boss. I had Lone Rider. I had Black Ice. I had Buckeye Tom, and I had Extra Special. I had so many dogs that have done so well, and so many females that we had, and thinking about John McDonald, all the years that he had and the success that he had, the Harkins up in
Iowa.
Oklahoma.
Oh, Oklahoma. Yeah.
They produced an outstanding bunch of dogs. Ed Abel, he was a blackened man through and through. I just really. Really
there's so many.
Appreciate our black man.
I to interrupt you, but the first year that I went to Black and Tan Days would have been in '83, when it was in my job to travel to all the breed days.
Yep.
I could not believe as we pulled into the fairgrounds, and I believe that first one was at Charlie Brown Park in Florida. I could not believe there were that many black and tans in the world, much less at Black and Tan Days. You guys really came out for your breed days, and was one of. I was talking to Ray Dismukes the other day, and our mutual friend, and we were talking about how big the Texas State Hunt used to be, and we mentioned Black and Tan Days, and those two, maybe with the exception of Autumn Oaks, were actually the two biggest hunts in the country. For a long time.
They were.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say this much too, Steve. I really appreciated the UKC. I served as a judge, a master of hounds. Later on, became a representative for y'all, and I really appreciated it, because it gives you an opportunity to work with people that what I call the movers, and you and Fred and John and all of those, and Sarah up there at the registration. Y'all were the people that were making it happen, and I really appreciate it. And let me tell you what, when you became part of the AKC, I was really excited, and I appreciated because you made a difference there. And I can remember when we were trying to get our black and tans registered in AKC, they had an AKC registry.
Yeah,
So
they had a
black
parent
and
club
tans,
there.
and they didn't want to let our dogs in.
Yeah.
Roger Seabrook and I come up with the idea of all right, let's just put the registration number and put an X behind our dogs that are registered. That way, everybody knows that those dogs come from either UKC or PKC. And if you bred X to X, they stayed X. If you bred X to the line that was there, the offspring would result in X bred dogs. So, and I got to thank Roger Seabrook. He's no longer with us, but what a great help he was to me and to the black and tans to get into the AKC. I'm sorry that AKC didn't flourish.
Yeah, well, I am too, and that's really an in-depth story that I haven't told on my podcast, but I will say that, I get a lot of pride today when I look at the major shows on TV, like the Westminster Kennel Club show and National Dog Show and to see our coonhound breeds, the ones that were typically UKC registered down through the years. And we're over here kind of like the stepchildren. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but, at the family reunion, they kind of cast an eye. But those breeds did not come into full recognition with AKC very easily. There was a lot, as you well know about the black and tans.
Yes.
There was a lot of opposition. Those people, honestly, and they were good people, but they were afraid. They were concerned that this tidal wave of these non-typical to them black and tan dogs, shorter ear, more streamlined, not the old-fashioned, long-eared maple
heel
type dogs, and they were just basically terrified. I can remember going to parent club meetings, and man, I could have used a bodyguard, at some of those things.
Well,
how dare I, suggest. But we made it, and another battle was with the walkers because there was a fear that the foxhounds would be swept away by these walker coonhounds.
By the Korean hound.
Yeah, but they all seem to have gotten along really well, and these coonhound breeds, as we know them, have done exceptionally well in AKC in the shows. I haven't seen one win Westminster yet, but they certainly are up there and taking groups and all this, So that was all part of my education and was really my last attempt at doing something for coonhounds. But I'm kind of proud when I look and see that those breeds are all in there now. And But yeah, I remember very well your contributions and Roger's and how hard you worked and on several projects. And I remember when we had the hunt up there in Ohio, and you contributed strongly to that event and all. But we gave it as good a run as when I talked to Jerry Mall. He was one of my team with AKC, and of course Lindell Price and Jimmy Phillips and David McKee. Those guys. And those guys great guys, absolutely salt of the earth guys. And when we talk about that, they'll each one say, "Well, we did the best we could, Steve." And if that wasn't good enough, but the deal was really UKC has such a great registry. And
Yes.
they get a lot of complaints right now because their service being slower than it used to be. But they had so much information dating all the way back to 1898. They had this pad pedigree with all the pups and the number of titles that each one had and all that. Well, the coon hunters loved to play the AKC game, the hunts. They liked the rules, but they just didn't see a need to register their dogs, or at least their litters, with AKC. They'd register that one dog that they wanted to run in the event. And for the amount of investment AKC was making, they quite honestly weren't getting the return on it that they wanted.
Steve, I'll tell you, one of the reasons that AKC made a mistake in 1986 when AKC was purchased, ACHA. I think they had like 50,000 records.
Yeah,
there.
Actually the opposite round.
And they gave a lot of money for it.
Yeah. ACHA was purchased by AKC. Yeah, go ahead.
But what they failed to do when they did that, they turned right around and wanted to charge us $15 or $20 to register our dogs with AKC. My argument with Dick Sheets and all them says, wait a minute. You purchased a registry that you recognize as being legitimate. Why not recognize the paper and issue AKC papers?
Well, of course.
And that was the mistake. Now, later on, you come along and made free registry. But it, like they say, the horse was gone, the gates too late to close.
Well, when they asked me to come to AKC, I was with PKC at the time. And I liked PKC. I had a great 7 years there. I loved Larry Meeks, the president at that time.
Good people.
And, but when I was asked to come to AKC, and it wasn't the first time. Back when I was in UKC, George Slankard, who owned American Coon magazine, he and Fred Miller didn't get along. And George, called me one day. I was grilling steaks on the deck, and the phone rang, and it was George, and he said, AKC wants to talk to you about a job. And I thought, now, George, you're just trying to set me up here because I know what the relationship of you and Fred, and it went back to when they tried to establish a national coonhound association at Autumn Oaks, and George and Fred couldn't agree on who was going to run it. And that's what their animosity was. And they were in competition. When we started building Coonhound Bloodlines magazine, well, then George perceived that as a threat to American Cooner. So anyway, I said, go ahead, Kenwood.
No, I see where the friction was.
Yeah. So I told George, I said, well, George, if AKC wants to hire me or talk to me about a job, why aren't they calling me? Why aren't they talking to me? Why are you calling me? And of course, George was a breed of he was a bird of a different feather. He was a businessman, and he kept Cooner going for many years, and gotta thank him for that, and all. But it's a lot. I tried never to burn bridges, no matter where I was. I was honestly thankful for the opportunity to work in those registries, and each one was a little different, and each one had a little different challenge to it. But I was a UKC man. I mean, I had been since I was a kid. And I was a field rep, as you were, starting in 1978, the first year that Fred did a world championship. And so UKC was my first love, and I always, and I want to give a shout out right now to Alan Gingrich and Trevor Wade, the guys that are in the hunting ops department. They're great guys. They're doing a great job, and they go out of their way to treat me extra special good when I'm at Autumn Oaks or something. And I am so grateful to those guys because they don't have to do it. I left UKC to go to a competing registry, and likewise with I said I left UKC to go to PKC, and then ultimately ended up in AKC. But it was a great ride, but yeah, I can well remember your involvement, Kenwood, and your
I'll say this: the rules that are most beneficial to the coonhound is the AKC hunting rules.
I agree.
By far are the most. They get the right dog in the right position, and I appreciate that.
Well, when we drafted those AKC rules that I'm assuming they're still running under today, we drafted those around my dining room table in Raleigh, North Carolina, with the guys I mentioned to you before: Jerry Mall, Lindell Price, Jimmy Phillips, David McKee. And what we did is we looked at the UKC rules and the PKC rules and said that this was our approach. Which are the ones that are keepers? Which are these rules that are really getting the job done? Which are the ones that we want to incorporate into our rules? Okay, so we did that. And then we said, okay, which ones are the ones that we don't like, the ones we don't think are doing the job? Something that maybe they're good, but they could be improved. And that's kind of how we worked that. And then it was like, okay, boys, what do you want? What do you think we ought to do here that's over and above or outside the box? And that's when we came up with things like the strike rule that AKC has. And I see message forums all the time, guys, on what are we going to do about these babbling dogs? And I said, well, we solved that problem, back in the 90s with our early 2000s with AKC, with the strike rule. And guys that have hunted under that rule will tell you that's the best. That's the answer, So anyway, but that's how those rules came about. We borrowed a little here and there because they still have that same basic structure that those old boys after World War II down in Alabama there, that Robert Graves and those fellas put together those first set of ACHA rules, But yeah.
Well, I always loved hunting under the AKC rules. I thought they were the most fair, and the top dog usually come out on top.
Yeah. Well, speaking of top dogs, now you mentioned some there that you had. What was your lifetime coonhound that you did look back and say he was the best or she was the best?
Well, the ice dog.
Okay.
Was a young when he started like with a bang, made Grand Eye champion in AKC, won some money in PKC. A dog that was a tremendous hound was a half brother to him called Buckeye Tom. But Buckeye Tom got away from us one night, and he treed all night, and he lost his voice. So it out-hunt his voice. So you couldn't put him in a big hunt because get out there a quarter of a mile and you'd lose him.
Yeah.
But he was really a good hound. The Lone Rider made an impression on.
I always liked that dog's name. Man, that's a cool.
He was
name.
A good hound, big old stout 90-pound hound, and his brother was a dog called Sir Duke in Oregon that they hunted lion with him, and that dog freed 16 mountain lion one summer by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an athlete. He could jump over the tailgate of a pickup, and he weighed 85, 90 pounds. Big dog.
When you're talking about they treat those lion in the summer, he's doing that on dry ground, not in snow.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
and
So,
they had to have a nose.
but I had some great hounds, and really, and you think about it. I got with Dr. Kiefer at A&M. We're going to write a program for a computer that's going to solve all our genetic problems, and we're going to produce the outstanding hound. Well, there's a lot of things you can predict, but there's damn too many genes and what have you.
Yeah,
Yet a dog's makeup to come up with them. You can predict color. Can't can't predict mouth.
right.
But you can, when you go to doubling up on tree dogs, you can produce tree dogs. If you're not careful, you'll produce more tree dogs than you
Hmm.
want.
Yeah, we found that out, especially in the
Yeah,
Walker breed for a few years
that's
there.
right.
Yeah,
They
sure.
quit trailing. They wanted to tree every tree. They didn't care whether it was a coon up there or not. And I've seen some dogs do that in our breed.
Oh yeah, yeah. You do see them. That's. I don't know. I haven't seen as many of those slick tree artists in my chosen breed, the plot breed. People would argue, well, they don't ever tree. That's why they don't have a slick tree. But no, they want to catch their game, and I think that's a lot of their treeing is motivated by I'm going to get my mouth on
Yep.
that varmint that's up there, and that's the only reason I'm doing this. But
Yep.
yeah, accuracy. That dog that locates on scent and is confident that he's
Yep.
got that animal, and he'll stay there till you get there and snap him up. That's the gold standard as far as I'm concerned. And man, there's been some good tree dogs in the black and tan breed.
Ever have.
I
Yeah.
think I'm just from my feeble memory. I think of the Sting dog.
Oh yeah, super staying.
Yeah, Mr.
and
Riley
and
LaFoon's
and,
dog.
and set them up ace
Set him up ace. What
and Southern Gauge and God, and look at all the dogs that Gene Hicks
I
produced.
was
The
just
Elber
going to
dog.
say those Albert dogs that came from Dr. Porter down there, I think was the origin of that, maybe in Alabama.
Yep,
Where
they were good hounds.
Absolutely were. There's a guy named Chad McCoyne up in Ohio. I know,
That's
Indiana,
right.
that's breeding some really good black and tan dogs now. I know because do you know Randy Smith of Mississippi?
Oh yes.
Yeah, yeah. Randy goes to White River with us every year. Randy
Okay.
is always packing a coon dog, and he's been hunting a lot of dogs out of that line from
Good
Chad.
deal.
So I know if Randy's sticking with them, they're they got the goods. So yeah, it's just great to look at that heritage and see because. I grew up on the magazines, reading Full Cry and American Coon. Did you have those magazines when you were
Oh
young?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was an old what was it?
Mountain Music was one.
Mountain Music. Yeah.
Yep.
And
And
then they had another one that was catered to the running walker.
probably the Red
Yeah,
Ranger.
the Red Ranger. That's right.
Yeah, that was a Southern Foxhound Registry down Alabama. I talked to those people about, we considered at one time getting into foxhounds at UKC. And, and that registry had a lot of history in it, but they didn't have a whole lot of dogs.
No.
The Hunter's Horn in Oklahoma, which
Yeah,
Terry Walker
and-
bought and published the magazine in there for many years. In fact, he sold that registry to Linda Scott that worked for him there when he shut down the Cooner and Full Cry. But that magazine, The Hunter's Horn, is still being published. And I used to love to read those old Foxhound magazines.
Well, I used to take my cotton picking money and have Mama subscribe to the hunter's horn, full cry, American cooner. Man, I had a stack of
Oh,
magazines there.
yeah. And read them cover to cover.
Yeah, I read them covered, and I could almost tell you every bark them hounds made while they were running them.
That's right. I've referred to this so many times, but I just love hound stories.
Oh yes,
And there's one called Bugle, the voice of Bugle Ann, about a foxhound in Kentucky that was killed by a tobacco grower, and the feud that came out of that. Oh, great book. But I stumbled on a book while I was in bear hunting camp in Arizona. I was out there with my friend Tom David, who operates at Summit Outfitters, and I just went out for a week just to kind of help him handle dogs and just see some new country. And that I didn't care anything about killing a bear, but he had a client there that week from California. And when we're back in camp at night, I noticed this book laying there, and I'd pick it up and I'd read a chapter in it. And it's called Tales of Old Traveler. And Traveler was a foxhound, but he was used by a bobcat hunter here in Florida. And this guy's name is funny. It was B.S. Jones. And he was the best hound storyteller I've ever read in my life. And I still pick that book up often and read and reread those stories, about he would hunt the big bobcats, and old Traveler could trail them up in this old hot sandy terrain down here in Florida, thickets and all that. Anyway, just been a hound man all my life. Kenwood.
Well, you got to look in at some of the early dogs in Tennessee Lead.
Oh yeah,
they used him as breeding foxhounds. They used him to breed, and he produced a lot of black and tans.
He was a black
Hans
and tan
Wagner,
colored dog himself.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Hans Wagner used him in his breeding program.
Now I'm not sure I knew that, but I do know. Hans was a guy that is pretty well recognized as the fella that developed the medium-eared black and tan,
right.
the type we have today. And what I used to read his ads just like reading a novel of hunting in those river bluffs in Iowa and all that with those black dogs. Great stuff.
Yep.
I've taught myself horse here. I'm going to have to take a drink real quick.
Hans Wagner had some interesting ways of breeding his dog, and he did what I call purifies his strain by line breeding, and that's where he bred the ear off of them. But he still had pretty good nose. The Night Rider dog of John McDonald was a direct son of Hans Wagner's line.
Well, some of the younger fellows may not know John McDonald, but he was a moving force in the black and tan breed.
Oh, yeah.
And you and him kind of partnered up, didn't you?
Yeah, we partners on some dogs, and John was Little Cole was Cole Younger was the 6th place in the world hunt, ACHA hunt. Night Rider won the state hunt, hunted against Merchant's Bally, got beat by 25 points. And I'm going to tell you this story right quick.
Please do.
But we were hunting in Mahia, Texas, and there was 31 people that went out in the cast. It was John McDonald, Merchant's hunting Merchant's Bally.
Yeah, James.
And there was another dog or two, but those were the 2 dogs that everybody went to see.
Yeah,
and it was nip and tuck. They would treat together, or they'd split, and each one have a coon and what have you. But I'll never forget it. Night Rider treed on on a hollow snag. The old stag wasn't but about 6 foot up there. And an old man stepped up there and looked down there and says, "Possum in there." And John said, "Ain't no possum in there." He said, "Yeah, there's a possum in there, John. I'm looking at it." John said, "There ain't no possum in it." And John said, "There is no possum in there." Guy said, "Man, I got $100. And old John pulled out a $100 bill right quick and he handed it to me and said, "Hold this money." And they pulled that tree down, and I mean, that old man chopped it all over. There was only a little coon in there. And later on, I kind of slipped up beside John. I said, "John, how did you know there wasn't a coon in that? I mean, a possum in there?" He said, "Night Rider never let me get to that tree if there was a possum in it."
He'd have been out of there and gone, huh?
Yeah, he'd have been out of there and gone. But John was a pleasure to hunt with. We were hunting with a real long-eared black dog that a fella come out of Arkansas with. We had Cole Younger, and Cole Younger was cold nose, and we struck, and we walked in there. Cole wasn't opening, and Cole would wag his tail a little bit, but he wouldn't open on it. And that big dog jumped up on a log and trailed all the way across that log. I told John, I said, "Cottontail." "Yeah," John said, "that's what it looks like." We didn't say anything. The old dog goes out there and pulls up on a tree, and he goes to tree, and it's a hollow post oak that's hollow from the top down. John said, "Scoot me up there. I want to see what's in there." And there was a coon in there, and Cole had never made a bark. And John didn't think there was a dog alive that could trail any better than Cole. But that long-eared dog, and later John bred a Cole Younger to a female, and he produced a female that was long-eared and a good mouth on her. And I can't remember what he called her, but she was a good hound.
Well, the first time I met Gene Hicks, we spoke of him earlier, was at a show over in eastern Tennessee, and he was hunting that old Thunder Mountain Mingo, not hunting, but showing that Mingo dog, and he was the longest-eared black and tan I'd ever seen at a UKC event, you know.
Yeah, he went back to the Gossett line.
Yeah. Okay.
That was
we mentioned the Cosners well, I just had it on the end of my tongue. The other dogs, there were some up there at Niles, Michigan, some there around.
Oh, the Eads brothers had tremendous black dogs up in that country.
Yeah, they were in Ohio.
They were in Ohio. They had some great hounds.
Oh yeah, they had that old Starlight Buckaroo dog, Legs. That's right. They called him, wasn't it, or something like that? He had they call him Legs. I can't. Yeah, I think so. Had a little white in his chest. But,
had a white spot in his chest. Sure did.
Yeah. Well, okay. Speaking of these dogs and competition and all of this stuff, you did. I always thought an exemplary job of hosting the Purina Award for the Outstanding Night Hunt Coonhound in College Station. And that was the year that Tom Bradley from Virginia won the event, or the series, with a blue tick named Blue Run Gentleman.
That's right.
What about that? And I think I told you the other day, one of the highlights for me of that trip was getting to go there at A&M and see that big pile of cross ties and everything that they had getting ready before they set it on fire for the bonfire, which that was a world-renowned bonfire there at A&M. I can't imagine what that looked like once they lighted it up. But anyway,
it burned for weeks.
Yeah, I bet. Well, tell us about that experience for you.
Well,
Kenwood.
You called me and says, "Look, we'd like to come to Texas and do the Outstanding Coonhound gathering there in Texas." And I said, "Oh boy!" And then Fred called me and said, "Whatever it takes to get some place that's really nice, and we can really have a good time. So I got the Sheraton Ballroom,
Yeah.
and we got some professors from A&M to speak there.
Right.
We got some music. Remember, we had a dance that night.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Guy Manning and all of it. We had a good time, and you got to go out. And what it is that it was post oak trees that were cut at about 9 foot, and they were stacked together, and they were stacked on top of one another, and that would go up about 40 feet
Yeah.
for the bonfire.
Yeah.
And when they'd light that thing, that'd burn forever. The it was a real tragedy.
Yeah.
They were putting that thing up, and for some reason,
someone fell or
twisted.
something, didn't they?
Yeah, that tile twisted, and there was several Aggies killed, and several Aggies that were injured real severely, and that ended the bonfire. But God, that was a tradition.
Yeah,
Man, of course, my daughter is an Aggie, and her husband's Aggie. My son's an Aggie. My granddaughter is an Aggie. My grandson, 2 of them are Aggies. So,
oh, yeah.
My grandson Bobby, we'd take him there and watch the bonfire burn and it would burn. It had coals for 2 weeks after that.
That's amazing. Yeah. So many great memories of Texas. I guess that's why I'm on this Texas tour here with these podcasts, because there's just so many great stories, so many great people. I remember when we had our hunt at Hearn. Did you attend the American Heritage Hunt that we had there at Hearn?
The first American Heritage Hunt was at Hearn, Texas.
Right.
And I had the high scoring dog for Saturday night.
Awesome.
It was a little female I called Lady Kate. Mike McCowan normally handled her, but he was working cattle or something and couldn't. And I took her, and she put on a show for me.
Oh,
three
coon,
awesome. Three coon, had first on all 3 coon.
Well, we really tried to make that a kind of, in conjunction with the Texas State Coon Hunters and the local hunters there and all. We wanted to make that something extra special, a patriotic type coon hunt. That's why, I don't know, I think somebody said that maybe Bud Drumgoole was the one that came up with the name, but I don't remember that for sure.
Bud Drumgoole we were looking, you and I had talked about what are we going to call this hunt. And I was talking to Bud, and Bud said, I got the name of that. I said, you do? What do you think it ought to be? He said, the American Heritage. He said, you think about it, it's in our heritage to hunt. We look at George Washington and what have you. Mm-hmm. And then he took that to you, and of course, here come the American Heritage. And I thought it was appropriately named, and I was so hoping it would take off as a spring hunt.
Yeah.
And
I think it would have there, except the fairgrounds kind of got cantankerous on us and
that's
hard to deal with. I don't, they wanted more and more money, and there isn't an endless supply. When you're doing something like that, you're mostly working with volunteer, people and all. But it was such a great thing that I'll never forget in the rodeo grand entry parade we had in the arena. And I remember Ron and Terry worked with us on that a good bit, on that production part of it. And we had Lee Greenwood on the PA system with Proud to Be an American. And we had that young fella fresh home from the sandbox over there that was hunting in the hunt, and we recognized him, And there was a speech there. I think we had a
Yep.
representative from the NRA there. And without going into full detail, he said, go ahead.
It was so well done and so well presented that it was a moving experience because it really was a proud event, you know.
Yeah, it was. It talked about our heritage, and we had the coon hunters on their mules with the dogs,
Yep.
and even had a chuck wagon in the parade, and we had the gals mounted, color guard. And there's in the UKC Centennial book that they published for their 100th anniversary, there's a photo from the American Heritage of those mounted color guard, with the flags and all. It was just a real prideful event, but it was also, and I remember our departed friend Harry Lister put on a little demonstration with his slingshot.
He could shoot that thing.
Boy, he could throw a glass marble, probably an inch in diameter, out across the arena floor, and burst it with another one out of that slingshot.
I love old Harry.
Harry told me
Harry had
that
such a way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Such a way of presenting himself.
Oh yeah.
I drew him one night, and my old trail dog, boss dog, got in there, and he had such a pretty locate. He had this long dying old locate, and old Harry was standing there and said, "Man, listen to the jaw on that dog."
Yeah, he was a dandy, and one of my greatest regrets is just shortly before Harry passed, he called me and left a message on my voicemail that I did not return. He said, "Steve, this is Harry. I just thinking about you and just wanted to give you a call and say I hope you and your family are all well." And boy, that's one of the biggest regrets of my life. Yeah, that I did not return that phone call. I meant to. It's one of those things. I gotta do that, and it just slipped away too quick. But and it was kind of that way with Jarvis too. Nubbin Moore, you mentioned him, and he called Nubbin. We were in the truck together at the White River, and Nubbin had called him to wish him happy birthday, I think it was, or some such. And he called back to Nubbin to just tell him he's sorry he missed his call. And I got on the phone with him, and we talked a little bit, and he always called me Brother Steve. And he said, I'd be glad. I asked him to come on the podcast, and he said, I'd be glad to do that. Steve, you call me. And it was just a matter of days before he passed away. So many great people,
Yeah, just think how quick Carl Meinhardt went.
Oh, yes. That's another great coon hunter.
Great black and tan man.
Absolutely.
And Riley LaFoon, and you go thinking about these people, and there's so many that were made an impact.
Oh yeah,
and were an influence in my life. Just knowing them, they made me a better person.
Yeah, our lives are enriched by the people that we meet along the way, and. And I've been so blessed in that regard, not just in the black and tan breed, but in all the breeds, actually.
In all the breeds,
to meet so many great people. Well, Kenwood, we have spoken to each other for almost an hour and 20 minutes. It's been a great visit. I want to do this again because we got lots of stories.
Well, I enjoyed it, Steve, and I appreciate the visit, and I appreciate sharing memories with you.
Well, to me, you guys like you are an inspiration to me. I knew Mr. Wimp Aaron over in Mississippi. I don't know if you knew him. He was a Walker man, and he was still coon hunting at, I think, 93. 94, something like that.
That's wonderful.
So guys like you are an inspiration to me. Your mind's sharp as a tack. You've got all these terrific stories to share, and that's what this podcast is about. Now, I can chase around the big winners of every event and interview them, and they're good.
Yep.
I just had Mark Gilmore on, and Mark, he won a $100,000 hunt over in Mississippi. He won a $40,000 side-by-side. He's won all kinds of money with that Clyde dog of his, and a great guy to interview. In fact, his episode is airing right now as you and I are recording. But but I like to talk to the guys that have the experiences and the stories.
And let me tell you what, Mark is such a worthy coon hunter too. I mean, I'm so glad he's winning. Got a good dog in that Clyde dog. I'm telling you right now, and Mark, when he shows up at the hunt, regardless of what dog he's handling, you know he's got a coon dog with him. Yeah. And he's just a gentleman, a pleasure to hunt with. I can remember when I was having trouble with my knees, Mark was just a young fella. I was hunting a dog called Extra Special, and he got in there way in there and treed, and the hunt was over. And I started walking, and Mark was there, and he said, "Where are you going, Mr. Maeker?" I said, "I'm going to have to go get my dog." He said, "You give me that lead, I'll go get him." And I'll tell you what, he went in there about a half, 3/4 mile, and he got that dog. And I'll never forget Mark doing that. That was just, he didn't have to. He just took it on himself.
Absolutely.
Give me that lead.
Character shows, He's another guy there that he said he was kind of country, kind of town. He's in Dallas County, but his grandfather was a coon hunter, and his dad was a coon hunter, and that heritage, and it's tremendous. Well, Kenwood Maeker of Flatonia, Texas, 80, how many? How many years now?
I'm 87. Was born in 38. January of 38.
You are an inspiration, sir, and I know you don't wish for 87 more, but I hope that it's many, many, many more. And I mentioned, I think, when I was talking to Dismukes about when you and Nubbin Moore and I rode the little the ferry across there at Maddox Bay on the White River, and we went hunting over there. That's where Nubbin tried to collect a stud fee on old Max, his dog, that night. So you remember that, don't you?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, I told the story, and I'll just briefly mention it. Max had got off in the country there, and we were trying to round him up with the four-wheeler, and we knew he was treed, and then everything got quiet at that tree. And Nubbin says, "Well, I'm going to go get my dog." And after a bit, here comes another guy on a four-wheeler, and he said, "You haven't seen a red bone, have you?" And he said, "Well, there's another dog barking in there with my buddy's dog." So anyway, long story short, they were having a little rendezvous under the tree. But I asked Nubbin, I said, "Do you ever collect that stud fee?" He said, "Yeah, I talked to that guy, and he said she didn't have any pups." Great stories, and we got a million of them, Kenwood, and we need to share them. So let's get together again. What do you say?
I'll look forward to it, Steve. You take care.
Okay, I wish you the very best, my friend. That's Kenwood Maeker, our guest this week on the Gone to the Dogs podcast. We'd be remiss if we didn't thank our sponsors, W Hunting Supply. They have everything you need for you or your hounds. I also want to thank Alpha Dog Nutrition, a new sponsor this last year. All the supplements and nutritional items that you need to keep those dogs performing at peak level. And cannot forget my good buddy, Big Mark Zepp Predator Calls, always a strong supporter of this podcast. Until next time, folks, this is Steve Fielder for Kenwood Maeker. We're going to tell you that if you're looking for us, we'll just, you got to figure we've gone to the dogs.
Take care.
Take care, Kenwood.